Imagine waking up to a letter taped to your cabin door. Bold red letters reading 72-hour notice to sell or face penalties. No phone call, no warning, just a threat from the HOA that shook me straight out of my morning coffee. This place wasn't just a cabin, it was my escape, the quiet corner of the woods I worked years to earn. I paid every due, followed every rule, or so I thought, but the HOA claimed otherwise. Suddenly, I was being forced to sell my own property or deal with legal consequences they made sound as scary as possible. They said my short-term rentals were damaging the neighborhood character. Meanwhile, half the board members were quietly renting out their own places for extra cash. Hypocrisy much? I asked for a meeting. Denied. I requested a copy of the violation reports. Crickets. It was clear. They didn't want a solution. They wanted me out. But here's the part they didn't expect. I didn't back down. I got creative. You see, the HOA didn't know who actually owned the land under the clubhouse and half the common areas. They missed one very important detail in their paperwork. And that detail gave me a way to turn the tables. Fast. So, when they tried to force me to sell my cabin, I gave them something else instead. I tripled their rent. Overnight. But trust me, that was just the beginning. What happened next? Let's just say it changed the game completely. Let me back up a bit. I bought that cabin almost 10 years ago, tucked deep in the mountains, away from city noise and traffic. At first, it was just for weekend escapes, somewhere peaceful to unplug. But over time, I fixed it up, added solar panels, modern plumbing, and even built a cozy guest house out back. When I wasn't using it, I rented it out to hikers and travelers. Nothing crazy, just enough to cover the mortgage and maintenance. Everything was above board, or so I believed. The HOA had never said a word. I paid every annual fee, showed up at meetings when I could, and even helped shovel snow on community roads during storms. But all of a sudden, that 72-hour notice showed up. The letter claimed I was violating zoning restrictions and disrupting neighborhood standards, with threats of daily fines and legal action. No prior notice, no warning, just an ultimatum. What made it worse? I found out they were holding private meetings, no minutes, no transparency, and fast-tracking changes to the bylaws. It looked like a setup. A couple board members owned cabins nearby and had just listed theirs for sale. My place, being popular on rental sites, made theirs harder to move. It felt personal. That's when I started digging into the HOA records, ownership filings, and lease agreements. And that's when I discovered something they'd clearly overlooked, something buried in a decades-old deed that flipped everything upside down. I wasn't the one on their land. They were on mine. The more I looked into those old land records, the more bizarre it got. Turns out, when the original developer built the community decades ago, he leased out certain parcels instead of selling them outright, including the land under the HOA clubhouse, parking lot, and even the road leading into the private gate. And guess who bought that original lease when it quietly went up for sale at a county tax auction 3 years ago? Me. I didn't even think much of it at the time, just figured I was buying some backwoods parcel with potential. But now? That lease changed everything. The HOA had been using my land for years without realizing they didn't own it outright. And worse, their lease agreement had expired 6 months before they sent me that notice. No renewal, no payments, nothing. Legally, they were trespassing. I brought it up at the next HOA meeting, but they refused to even let me speak. One board member actually laughed it off, calling it a technicality. But I wasn't smiling. This wasn't just about me anymore. A couple neighbors started reaching out in private. One had been fined for putting up a small solar panel. Another was told her cabin's paint color violated visual harmony, whatever that means. Most were too scared to push back. The board had built a pattern of targeting anyone who didn't play along. That's when I knew it wasn't just my fight. It was a power grab. And I was holding the one card they didn't see coming. I knew if I wanted to make this count, I had to move carefully. So instead of arguing with the HOA in another dead-end meeting, I went straight to a property attorney. We reviewed the lease, agreement, and pulled up the county land maps. It was all there in black and white. My name on the land under their buildings with a lapsed lease and 0 payments for over 6 months. And the best part? The lease gave me full rights to renegotiate terms or terminate at will. That meant I could legally charge rent or deny access completely. Word started spreading fast, especially after a certified letter showed up at the HOA office outlining the new rental terms. I tripled their rent and gave them 30 days to respond. No surprise, they didn't take it well. They sent me a cease and desist, accusing me of harassment. Then came the anonymous letters in my mailbox, nasty notes left on my truck, and even a complaint filed with the county, which quickly backfired when the paperwork confirmed my ownership. Meanwhile, more cabin owners started coming forward with their own stories, unfair fines, blocked improvement requests, even threats for minor rule violations. This wasn't just about me or a cabin anymore. The HOA had been using their power to push people around, and now that someone pushed back, they were scrambling. Still, I knew this was going to explode, and I was ready. Because what came next wasn't just a rent bill, it was a full reckoning. When I thought I had the upper hand, the HOA pulled a move I didn't see coming. Out of nowhere, I received notice that they had filed a petition to have my land claim voided, arguing that the lease had been abandoned and that my purchase through the tax auction was invalid. It was a stretch, and they knew it. But it bought them time and stirred up doubt. They even tried to get an emergency injunction to stop me from enforcing the new rent. Suddenly, I was no longer dealing with just a stubborn HOA board. I was staring down a full legal battle. The stakes jumped overnight. Their attorney went public, claiming I was trying to shake down the community for profit. I started getting flooded with calls from reporters, some sympathetic, others clearly fed their lines by the board. They painted me as a rogue landowner, threatening to tear up a peaceful mountain neighborhood. The truth? I hadn't evicted a soul. I hadn't shut down the clubhouse. All I did was demand rent on land they were using without permission. Then came the real twist. An anonymous envelope showed up at my door. No return address. Inside were internal HOA emails, screenshots, PDFs, all dated within the last year. In one, a board member outright admitted they'd let the lease lapse, hoping no one would notice. Another one joked that my cabin rental needed to go before it hurts property values. That was the moment everything changed. I wasn't just defending my rights anymore, I was exposing theirs. With those leaked emails in hand, I knew exactly what to do. I turned them over to my lawyer, who filed a motion to countersue the HOA for defamation and breach of lease. But we didn't stop there. We handed the documents to the local news station that had been following the story. By the next morning, my name was off the chopping block, and the HOA had a spotlight they weren't ready for. The news report laid it all out: expired land leases, internal schemes to target certain property owners, and manipulation of HOA bylaws without full member votes. Neighbors were furious. At the next emergency HOA meeting, held in a packed clubhouse that ironically sat on my land, members demanded a vote to remove the board. All but one of them were ousted on the spot. That should have been the end. But here's the twist. As the dust settled, I got a call from the county. During the investigation, they found other expired leases just like mine, scattered across several HOA-managed properties in the region. Turns out, this wasn't just a one-time oversight. It was a widespread mess going back decades. The county asked if I'd be willing to help map and review the holdings, given how deep I'd already dug. So yeah, they gave me 72 hours to sell my cabin. Instead, I tripled their rent and ended up helping clean house, not just in one community, but maybe more. All because they underestimated the guy with the cabin in the woods. In the months that followed, the community started to feel like a different place. With a new HOA board in place, this time made up of actual residents, not just power-hungry investors, things got a lot more transparent. They reinstated public meetings, opened up finances, and even held a vote on short-term rentals. This time, the decision was made fairly, and most people agreed to strike a balance instead of banning them outright. That alone could have saved all of us a lot of trouble from the start. As for me, I kept the cabin. I still rent it out now and then, but mostly, it's back to being my peaceful escape. That clubhouse? They renewed the lease, at fair market rate, and I used part of the income to improve the trail access and help fund local fire prevention efforts. Funny how fast things turn around when people are actually treated with respect? And that neighbor who left the anonymous envelope? I never found out who it was, but I owe them a lot. Sometimes standing up for yourself opens a door for others, too. That's the real story here. Not just how I fought back, but how a whole community found its voice again. So yeah, when the HOA gave me 72 hours to sell my cabin, they thought they were pushing me out. What they really did was push me to look deeper, think smarter, and stand my ground. And in the